I'm joined today by Will Norman, who's the Commissioner for Walking and Cycling at Transport for London. And he's been very busy recently delivering a whole new vision for walking and cycling in London as a result of COVID-19. So, Will, perhaps we can start. Can you tell me of that light bulb moment when you realised that you had to implement a dramatic shift in the way we move around London?
So, Peter, for the first few weeks of the COVID crisis, I think all of us were really focused on how do we keep people at home rather than encouraging, complete turnaround for the mayor, for Transport for London, for everyone. It's not talking about walk more, cycle more, get on public transport more. It was all about stay at home, don't do any of that stuff. But then it was actually, as we got through that crisis, there was a moment when someone was explaining to me that on a busy sort of Northern Line tube train, the average number of people per square metre is 4 people per square metre on a tube train. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, you and I know what it's like queuing up for a tube train in the mornings. And it's like, oh my God, how are we going to manage that with any form of social distancing? The potential for that means that you've got millions of journeys that would have to be made by other modes. And the sort of thing that leapt into my mind is, my God, if those all end up being by car, or a lot of them, or any fraction of them really end up being by car, London's going to gridlock. We're going to end up with our streets being jammed up, the businesses will really struggle to get deliveries. Those essential journeys won't get through. The emergency services will have problems. And then the last thing, the other consequence of that, as we all know, is a toxic air crisis. And the very last thing we need when there's a respiratory disease pandemic knocking about is toxic air. So at that point, it's like, my goodness, we've really got to think in a radically different way about how we move people around our city, both to manage a recovery for London, to keep us internationally competitive, because, people are making investment decisions and trying to financially plan for the future, and employee safety is at the top of that, as well as making sure that we don't come out of this public health crisis by sort of laying the seeds of the next one, both in terms of air pollution and toxicity, but also inactivity. So it was at that moment that it was really all of these things that sort of really sank home. We need to radically rethink about that. And that's really how the mayor's sort of street space plan was born.
I'm finding all these pop-ups that are going up wonderful, but I'm noticing in my local area there's debate from car drivers about it's going to make their life more difficult, it's going to cause traffic jams, rat running, all that sort of thing. What sort of response are you finding generally from Londoners?
So I think there is always, what I've found throughout this whole job, to be honest, Peter, a lot of people are naturally sort of apprehensive of change. But I think there are 2 points that I sort of talk through with this. Is doing nothing is not an option. If those journeys that I talked about, potentially up to 8 million journeys a day, all shift to car, then everybody's going to be jammed up. And so what we need to do is, I know that not every journey can be walked or cycled, but millions and millions can be. So what we need to do is make it safe enough to enable those people who can walk and cycle to do so, that will free up that essential space on our public transport network as well as on our roads for those who can't. And many of these things, low traffic neighbourhoods, I think is a really important tool in terms of how we manage this crisis, but I see is going to lay a really important part of how we rethink our future. Now, that's all about filtering local streets so that people continue to walk and cycle safely. There's less rat running through those areas. Now, sure, that makes it a little bit more difficult to drive your car to your house, but it doesn't prevent you doing that. What it prevents is people cutting through areas, people cutting, rat running, as you said, through a neighbourhood. Now, that initially is a difficult, all of us struggle to sort of see how that's going to work, particularly people who aren't transport planners and think, well, actually, if you block that road, it's going to be difficult. Actually, where we see that across London and where they've gone in, people love them. And the next thing you hear is, well, those guys over there, my neighbours over there have got this thing. They can hear birdsong. Their kids can walk to school safely. They haven't got polluted air. Why can't we have some of that? So change is a challenge for all of us, I think. But there's one thing that's constant, and you know this about London, is that change is the one thing that is constant in our city. And I think, this is just yet another step change in the way our city operates, the way it designs, and the way we live in it.
The boroughs are also delivering a lot of this. I mean, you've delivered wonderful things like the segregated route on Park Lane, which I think is a wonderful addition to getting around London. But do you think when the boroughs are delivering this, we will actually have a connected network of routes, or will it be patchy in different places?
As you know, the boroughs, they're the highway authority for 95% of our streets. So it's great to say, oh, you're the mayor's walking cycling commissioner, why don't you do all of this? But actually this does require collaboration, which is, you know, has always been part of the way that I've been working on this. What's been really, really exciting, I think, is seeing the boroughs coming forward with some really impressive plans. We've been getting hundreds, literally hundreds of projects coming in from different boroughs. I think we've had upwards of 20 boroughs submitting their plans for the street space plan, what they're going to do to deliver these changes. And some of the scale of ambition there is great. I know they're upwards of, I've seen over 100 plans for different sort of low traffic neighbourhoods across London, upwards of 150 school streets already, and that's in 3 weeks these things have come in. So there is ambition. Now, is that happening across all the boroughs? No, I think, as we all know in London, some boroughs have a greater scale of ambition on this agenda than others. So there was still some patchiness in terms of that ambition. But I think so part of my job is to continue to work with those boroughs who don't necessarily have that ambition, because what we really don't want are those holes in the network. Is this going to, in the next 4 months, deliver a complete cycle network across every bit of London? No. Is it going to massively build what we've already got, consolidate that, build up the links? Yes. And I think one of the things that really gives me hope at the moment is that this is no longer a party political issue. Actually, this is an area where the mayor and the prime minister are very much joined up. The mayor's set out his ambitions. The prime minister is talking about this new golden era of cycling. We're working closely with government to deliver this, and that makes it less of a Labour mayor trying to deliver this and Conservative boroughs not liking it, or vice versa. This is one of the pieces of an opportunity that we've got here, that there is a political consensus that this is going to have to be part of London's recovery.
So do you think perhaps in the medium and longer term we'll see more pedestrian priority streets? And what's your thoughts on the idea of zebra crossings at road junctions, which they've got in Paris, which hugely improve the experience for the pedestrian?
Yeah, so I think, you know, this is not just about cycling. This is also great for walking. One of the things we've been doing is reviewing our signal timings that give more time for people to cross with the green man, and less time queuing up. So part of this is all about improving those experiences for walking. I do think we'll see more pedestrianisation and more pedestrian space and more priority for people walking coming out of this. It's part of our central London plans. I know, working with the City of London and other boroughs, there's a lot of plans for this. We've already seen that actually this crisis has accelerated quite a lot of the work that's been in the pipeline that we've been working on for some years. So, for example, near where I live in Hackney, Broadway Market now is fully pedestrianised. Shops can still get delivery vehicles in, but suddenly it's just transformed the whole nature of that space. And I think what we're seeing is in certain high streets as well as in residential areas, a bit more of that balance shift towards people. And I'm encouraged by it. We can't take this for granted. This is not a done deal. While there's excitement about this here, we know that there are interests and waves of political attention on cycling and walking before. So I think all of our roles here, whether we are people like me who's at TfL, transport people, campaigners, communities, councillors, we all have a responsibility to make sure that this is actually a sustained change, so that we can all see the benefits, not just now, but for in the long term.
And the idea of zebra crossings at junctions, are TfL looking at that?
Manchester have been working on a programme to test this, and TfL are part of that. Now, I've always said that the zebra crossings are, you know, they've got great potential. They're not a silver bullet to anything, though. You know, in some parts of central London, I don't think that the pedestrian crossings at side streets would work because of the sheer volume of pedestrians always crossing at those spaces, and therefore you would end up jamming up the traffic, the buses, the deliveries, and that sort of thing. So, as with all of these things, I think that there are very useful sort of tool in our toolbox to continue to pursue the overall agenda that we have of actually making our city much more people friendly and drive more people walking and cycling. So I hope that that's one of the things that government will be looking at carefully. If it is, I know that there are areas of London where I'd love to roll that out, but I also don't want to wait for that to change to start the work, because we've got other tools that we can be using, that we are using, and we should just keep on and keep that momentum going, I think.
So can you give me a sort of little picture of your vision for London? What it'd be like in 5 years' time, say, once we come out of COVID, and hopefully many of these improvements will be not just pop-ups, but permanent.
I hope so. I think, there's got to be a due process to go through on that. At the moment, we are putting in temporary measures, but I know that, as we've seen elsewhere, once some things go in and people like them, they want to continue them. So that's going to be a process of, talking to communities, consulting, working with councils, and delivering that. But I suppose, personally, my view of the future is where my job doesn't exist. We shouldn't have a walking and cycling commissioner. Walking and cycling in London should be normal. That should just be the way that our city evolves. Now, whether we'll see that in the next 5 years or the next 10 years, but ultimately my ambition is to work myself out of a job, or whoever my successor might be in terms of out of the job. We should not have a walking and cycling thing as something special and abnormal. This should just be the way our city works, and that would be better for everybody. So coming out of this crisis, I share the Mayor's view that this is all about making London's recovery greener, cleaner, and healthier for everybody.
Well, I suppose just as the COVID-19 has accelerated our use of digital media like this, probably COVID-19 will accelerate the move towards more active travel to help meet the targets you set out to reach 80% by 2041. Maybe you'll reach that even earlier.
Then we'll have to change the targets and make them even more ambitious.
Will Norman, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Peter.